Celeb Savant is a career retrospective type interview focusing on singers, actors, and industry experts. Join Barrett Edelstein now as he dives into the entertainment world.
British Tricia Duffy is a media consultant, podcaster, public speaker, songwriter, and singer. Tricia started her career working as an entertainer on cruise ships in the United States. After several years at sea, she began a second career on TV, working at IMG, Sky, BBC, before founding strategy consulting firm Lily Gray in 2012. In 2017, she began writing and performing her own songs, first with Americana duo Duffy and Bird, and later via her solo project Little Law. In 2023, she became the United Kingdom chapter coordinator for the National Songwriters Association International. Alongside her solo artist project Little Law, Tricia writes with other artists and for television and film. The podcast In 10 Years' Time was created when Tricia was seeking to encompass the duality of her consulting identity with her songwriting. She looked for resources that could help her navigate the challenges she encountered. Finding very little that talked of these challenges, she decided to use her own experience to support others, and so In 10 Years' Time was born. Up next on Celeb Savant, we've got Tricia Duffy. Where do we find you in the world and how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me. I am in Chiswick in West London in the UK.
Okay, let's rewind. At what age did you think, cool, you want to be in the music or entertainment world, creative world? And how did that journey progress to where we are currently?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. So I was a very creative child. I wrote poetry in the middle of the night and I sang all the time and I loved drama. But I grew up in an area where there wasn't a huge amount of privilege or opportunity. So it was very much considered, because of the environment that I grew up in, that sort of thing should be kept as a hobby. You couldn't really rely on it for food on the table or keeping a roof over your head or keeping the lights switched on. So I was very encouraged by my family and my friends to create, but really to keep a sort of level on it and never think that it could be anything more than that. But of course, when I went through my teenage years, I sort of rebelled against that and thought, no, I'm different and I'll make a career out of this. And I actually became completely and utterly obsessed by the idea that if I got to America, because I was living in just outside Portsmouth in the UK on the south coast, if I could get to America, then all my dreams could come true, because I saw that there was great opportunity and space and money and all sorts of things happening in America. So that became a real obsession for me. And when I was 19, I left home and I went to work on cruise ships as a singer and an entertainer as cruise staff. And I guess that gave me quite a lot of confidence in creativity. But when I came home, after I worked at sea for 4.5 years, when I came home, I thought that my most transferable skills in entertainment would be in the television industry. But the TV industry had a lot of very clear boundaries around the roles that women could perform and the roles that men performed. And men were editorial and did the creative stuff, and women did the business side of things and the administration and the organising. So I really got shoehorned into production management type roles in TV. And I told myself a story for about 20 years that I wasn't a creative person. And it's only been really in the last 10 years or so that I've allowed that narrative to change and I've come back to my creativity. And as a result of that, I'm happier than I've ever been. But there has been quite a complicated journey to describe myself as a creative for that reason.
What was that thing that allowed you to change the narrative in your brain that you were not creative? Was there a very specific point or moment that you thought, well, no, this is not who I am, this is not my definition, or were it things over a period of time?
To tell myself I wasn't creative, I think it's a social narrative, because I think that there's so much pressure. And again, just thinking about my parents' generation and some of the generations of people that influence you, they did grow up in a post-war UK where, you know, there were different risk profiles of how you lived your life in those days. And I think that that really informs people's values. So, you know, having a job that pays a salary and keeps the light switched on becomes overrides all other things. And I also think, you know, I happened into an industry where, in television industry, where it was the privilege to work there. And, you know, they did put a lot of importance on sort of things like, you know, a formal academic career and that type of thing, which I hadn't had because I'd left school at 16 with, you know, no qualifications and no prospects. So I was a real fish out of water in that environment. So I did everything I could to fit in, and fitting in meant, you know, putting myself into, you know, becoming very, very good at a trade I didn't want to do. And I was good at it as well. I mean, your brain is very malleable, and it can grow and enhance lots of different skills. So I was quite skilled at what I did, but it was not the trade I chose. You know, I was fundamentally, and I believe that every human being is fundamentally creative, but I think there's a lot of narratives around women, particularly, that's, you know, to fit into society and to be a good feminist, you have to be a businesswoman, or you have to be good at things that perhaps don't interest you. So it's a little bit complicated, I think, for everybody. And it definitely, you know, wore me down over time. I think it's just easier sometimes to crack along and conform to societal expectations.
The next steps of allowing yourself to become creative, of being that and knowing that in your brain, what were those steps? Were they trigger points where it was like, oh, I need to change my thoughts? Was it that wearing of you down over a period of time? Or what were those things in your brain and your experience that allowed you to think, okay, I am creative?
The first thing that happened was I started singing again more meaningfully. And my singing teacher, one day as a throwaway remark, said something along the lines of, it's not too late for you, you know. You know, your voice is so good that if you wanted to, you know, go back to your a dream of, you know, professional music career, you're not too late. Your voice can be like this for another 40 years probably. And so she gave me a bit of confidence, but I still very much saw it as a hobby. And so I started doing a lot of things in music. So performing with a rock covers band, I started writing with a duo, an Americana duo. I got a part in a musical against all the odds and did a short run in a musical. And I guess that over time, I found that I had small children as well at this stage. So, you know, you've got a lot of different pressures. But what I found was that I was more satisfied and better able to cope with my job and the pressures of parenthood and domestic responsibilities when I had these creative things in my life. They gave me some sort of succor and satisfaction. But then a bigger trigger happened during the first few months of the pandemic, where at this stage I was working as a consultant, which I loved. And so leaving my sort of full-time employed status in television industry and becoming a consultant allowed me a lot more performance and creativity in my day job, because I would wield the flat-edged pen with a whiteboard and, you know, have an audience with the board or whoever.
Yes.
And so when the pandemic hit, I found that that just disappeared. All the fun parts of my job went away, and I was left with the sort of more drossy parts of, you know, creating PowerPoint decks and doing Zoom calls. And so I lent on my creativity, particularly my songwriting, then as a sort of form of, yeah, just keeping me feeling regulated and happy and connected and all of those things, which I think a lot of people can identify with, because I think a lot of us turned to our creativity during the pandemic. But it made me really reframe, and I think having the time to think in those months and years as well, my relationship with my creativity. And it made me just decide to sort of start looking at how I could manage the way I use my time differently going forward. And it made me question my relationship with money as well, and what I considered enough. So I mean, I radically cut my salary and have really changed my life. And my podcast came about because I decided to apply the thinking that I'd seen in creative organizations working as a consultant to them, to see whether I could apply it to my own personal life, what would happen. And that caused me to go, right, okay, well, what's my 10-year plan? How do I want to be living my life? How do I want to spend my only commodity, which is my time? How am I going to divvy that up, think of it like a budget, your time. How am I going to spend that budget? And what, therefore, do I need to put in place to make that happen? And it took me a few years to get to where I am now, where I've sort of got this philosophy. It empowered me. And I guess, the thing that I'm most passionate about now is both living a creative life myself and also inspiring and encouraging everyone else to do that as well, because I really see the benefits of that.
Are you still in the television space?
I work still a little bit,
Okay.
about a day a week, not a lot, just to keep the wolf from the door. Yeah. So I do a little bit of work.
What exactly do you do currently?
So I'm a management consultant.
Okay.
So I do strategy work and complex change for media organizations. So usually that involves going into organizations who need to make some sort of dramatic change about how they're going to create their content or make their content available to their audiences. And I advise them on how they can best do that. And because I've kept that up all the time, I stay current within the industry, but I'm now very selective about how many clients I take in. That's really the big change that I've made. I used to take 5 at a time, and now I take between 1 and 3.
So, for example, would that sort of been guiding channels on changes in the industry? So, like guiding BBC of when streaming came along and how to then incorporate it and it be part of their world. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, I mean, I worked at the BBC for 4 years as head of transformation, so I did that for them in-house.
I was just using that as an example.
No, I spent 4 years there, but my job then was actually to help them save £1 billion. So it was quite a specific job, and it included a lot of workflow change. So that's the sort of thing that I would do. So I've worked for broadcasters, I work for niche organizations, I work for organizations in the digital space as well to help them understand how they're going to navigate what's gone before. There's a lot of things that happen in the entertainment industry which make no sense to anybody if you were an alien and you popped into the earth and went, why do they do it this way? But there's a lot of legacy, and actually some of the newer organizations really benefit from expertise to understand, well, why is it that we create drama productions the way we do? Well, it might be because of the way locations work and the way the equity payments work and all of these things, these legacy things. If you just don't know them, you don't know them, and you could never imagine that they would be that way. So my expertise is very, very deep in the media sector. And then I have skills around strategy setting and change management specifically are the capabilities that I have that I can apply to those clients to help them reframe how their business operations and processes would match the environment they find themselves in.
Wow, that sounds fascinating and interesting. Now let's move into your music world. From 0 to 3 to 4 minutes in creating a song. What motivates it? What invigorates it? Is it easy every time? Do you create by yourself or with others? Let's unpack your creative process in creating a song.
I do both. I work alone and I work with others. The music I create for my artist project, Little Law, I tend to create by myself. I write by myself, I should say. And then I work with collaborators once the song is finished to create a version of it that can be released. The Little Law project is quite a personal project. It tells stories and usually reflects either a story that I want to tell, which sometimes is from a character's perspective. I describe myself as a method songwriter, so I love to write in character from the perspective of other people than myself. But also I tell personal stories as well, and I react to things that are going on around me. And then I also collaborate with others, either for a sync library that I work for, which is a TV and film library, or for other artists. So I will write with an artist who's looking for something to fill a gap in their album, or we all just get together and see what comes out of it, and it might end up to be something that's for their artist project. I love collaborating, and I do think that co-writing as a songwriter can be a bit more efficient. Usually, you can get something done more quickly, certainly to a decent demo stage. And I also think that a song can be very quickly better because you have multiple views and multiple eyes and ears and sort of ideas coming into one song, as long as you can create the right environment for that to happen. So I really do both, and I can't imagine ever stopping doing both, actually. They feed each other. It's like a virtuous circle. The more I write with others, I get better at writing by myself. The more I write by myself in a sort of like true artistry way, which is without an eye to where it's going to be pitched or what it's for, etc., the better I become, which allows me to be a better co-writer, which and so on and so forth. So it's a very much all of those are important aspects of the creative process for me.
From your experience and your observations, that it's more efficient writing and collaborating with others, which will potentially lead to it actually finishing as a demo. Is that because there's now accountability in the room? Someone else is in the room saying, yes, let's do it, compared to when you're doing it by yourself, maybe procrastination sets in, distraction sets in, other life things start happening, and they'll be like, oh, I'll get to it just now. And when you're doing it with other people, you can't bring in that distraction or that procrastination. It's like, we're here, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. So when I write with somebody else, there's an agreement already set when you walk into a room together, or sometimes I write remotely on a Zoom, that in the next couple of hours we'll write a song and we'll finish it. So there's an accountability that comes for both parties. We're responsible for each other. We've agreed to give our time, our only precious commodity, to write a song. And so, we should probably finish one in the next couple of hours if we possibly can. If I do a camp, so I was recently on a camp writing for Eurovision and for Asian markets. You finish demo in the day. You literally start with nothing, and by the end of the day, you've got a fully pitchable demo. So that's a different kind of process. We have a producer in the room who's building track alongside the song, the lyric and the melody writing process. When I write by myself, the truth is that I'm a great starter of things and I find it hard to finish them. So I've got magpie tendencies. Oh, look over there, shiny, 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 shiny. Having some sort of accountability does help me finish things. I usually start a song every single day. And by that, I mean I write a minimum of 4 lines. Sometimes I write an entire verse and chorus. Sometimes I finish the entire song. Mostly I write a verse and a chorus and I think I'll finish it later. And then sometimes I take those to co-write. So they become a bank of writable ideas, which I can bring to other people. I love starting things. I'm excellent at starting things. It's literally my super skill. It doesn't always mean that, I do have to sort of like really go, oh, you know what? That had so much premise, that song, or promise even. I should probably finish it up now. And that's harder for me. Yeah. Okay. This is like a confessional now.
Moving on to your podcast. Are you still recording it?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Podcast is called In 10 Years' Time, How to Live a Creative Life. And it is designed for anyone who wants to readdress the balance of creativity in their lives. So whether that be that they want to pick something up and start a hobby, or whether they want to move, as I do, to have that as a career, it's about supporting everyone to find a balance that's right for them and give them tools to be able to identify their creativity and amplify that creativity and overcome any limitations that they may have, whether they're perceived or practical limitations. So it's a research-based podcast. Okay. So a little bit different from this one in that every series has 6 episodes, which are 5 intimate conversations between me and the listener, which I research very, very deeply, and then an interview at the end that brings the whole thing to life. So the first series was really about the In 10 Years' Time philosophy, this idea that if you do a 10-year plan and you set yourself a North Star, you just leave that to one side and every day take a step towards it. It's like kind of creating an agreement with future you. I think I'll go for a run today because future me in 10 years' time me will really appreciate that type of idea. So it's very, very simple, actually. Just imagine what you'd like your life to be like in 10 years' time. Think a little bit about your mortality and about the relationships you have around you, and then make decisions every day that support that future, essentially. There's no 1-year plan or 5-year plan or anything like that. It's just let's set our North Star and step towards it. So that was the first series, really setting out that philosophy. The second series was very much about limitations, about overcoming. And I wanted to really address the fact that not everybody is equal when it comes to access to creativity, and we should be mindful of that. The third season is about amplifying. So how we can amplify our creativity, how we can push ourselves further. So for example, I've got an episode on reframing rejection, our relationship with the word no, and why we can address that and think of it differently. I've been running an experiment on myself of reframing the word no, trying to get rejected 100 times. I'm at 96 so far, so I've got 4 more to go.
When you say being rejected, what do you mean?
In what
in my
way?
creativity,
Oh, okay.
having my songs rejected, having my
Okay.
podcast rejected, having myself rejected if I put myself forward as a speaker. And obviously the ratios of that mean that you're putting yourself out there and then you get more yeses. But if you strive for the no's, it reframes and it gamifies that process for you and takes away some of the pressure of, oh, there's no point applying because I never would get a look in. Actually, you throw yourself out there, you don't know that. And actually the no could be a good thing. Put it on your rejection tracker, you got another no, and now we can start to use those failings to get success. They're not failures, they're small failings on the journey to success. So that's just one episode, which has been a huge breakthrough for me personally. And then I've got other episodes on things like how you can steal from academia to create a bigger, more complex project, how you might be able to mix your mediums or your crafts or your arts and do more than one thing. So there's a number of different topics. They all deep dive. And then the final one is an interview with a songwriter, actually, in this instance, a chap called Satch. Yeah.
Thank you. You just gave me massive aha moments. With this whole thing of rejection and this no thing that you referenced, I am challenged a lot by that because I do put myself out there a lot, especially with ideas and concepts. And I struggle a lot, or I'm challenged a lot when I get the answer no. It sometimes affects me personally. It makes me feel rejected and affects my self-esteem. I get into my brain like, when is it my turn? When is it my turn? But now if I take it at the angle of, oh, let's just do it and let's just go for a no, then the yeses will come through and I'll be excited and be surprised by them.
Exactly that. Exactly that. Today I posted on Instagram, actually, just a little reflection, because I do some morning pages every morning when I first wake up, about what has been the thing that's really made the difference in this idea of 100 no's, which was my concept. And the thing that's been actually the game changer has been recording them, actually writing them down. What did I learn? Well, one no I got because I hadn't read the small print and I applied using the wrong platform.
Okay.
So that's on me.
Yeah.
I can't blame anyone else for that no other than myself. So just that information in and of itself is hugely valuable, because hopefully that means I won't make that mistake again, you know?
Yeah.
But if I hadn't have recorded it and written it down, then I might not have noticed that or remembered that. It just gives you a framing by which to build. And also the things that I've had yeses for have really surprised me. You know, they haven't come where I thought they would. So you sort of, that idea of throwing socks on the wall and seeing what sticks, you know, I've just, you know, think, wow, actually, okay, that's interesting. I got somebody I wrote to who I knew works at The Guardian, and I wrote to them saying, would you be able to pass on my press release for, I think it was for the second series of my podcast, to 3 journalists I really admire? And he says, yeah, of course, I'll put it on their desks. Now, they didn't cover it, they didn't review me, but just asking that, it got to their desks, and I could have easily said, oh, you know, I'm much more likely to get local press, or, you know, I'll target this, I'll target that. I mean, it's getting easier as if you get to 3rd series, but 2nd series it's more difficult. But you can very easily discount because you don't want to hear that rejection. And by gamifying it and making the rejection the reward in a way, you can reframe your relationship with the word no. And that's quite empowering. And also the other thing is, the most common response that I get is nothing at all. I get ignored. So that is frustrating, but it doesn't really hurt me. You know, it's not like being told, no, you're rubbish, I hate your art and I hate your music or whatever. You don't get that at all. You just simply don't get a response. And so then I've had to kind of build in time into this to go, right, okay, when do I allow a no to ignore to convert to a no? Because they are no's, they're just not hurtful no's.
When I reach out for various things, artist interviews and so forth, and when I get a no, I take it as a not now. So when I respond, I say to them, thank you for your response. I'll get back to you in a few months' time to see if there's opportunity to collaborate at that stage.
I think that's very sensible. Very, very sensible.
And if I don't get a response from them, I keep following up. So not like 5 times a day, but like once a month, once every 6 weeks, once every 3 weeks. I keep emailing or following up and saying, hey, checking in, maybe we collaborate on this. And if there's still no response after a period of time, I phone them.
Tenacity is a great power in creativity, I think. And a book I used to sort of underpin the research for this is a surprising book. It's a book called Go for No, which is written by Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton. It's an American book. It's been around for a while now, and it is a book about sales. It's a sales book. It's nothing to do with creativity whatsoever, and it tells a fictional story of a man called Eric, who's a photocopier salesman in America, and how he changes his entire life by, instead of going for his target, going for no instead. So every week, because they tell the stats so that people say no 4 times on average in any sales circumstance. Now, I know we're not in sales, we're in creativity, and we hate to think of ourselves as selling.
Well, I think we actually are.
We're just explaining our art, or we're offering our art, not selling in a kind of transactional way.
Yeah.
But if it's true that people usually say no to things 4 times, and we know that people have to see things 7 times before they engage, there's all sorts of statistics about that. Well, we should use that to our advantage.
Yeah.
And as you rightly say, all of my no's, I mean, my reframe for I've got to think about what I do to experiment on myself is going to be thinking, right, what's the right appropriate target for my nose, given the experience I've had, which is running about a 10% success rate, which is not bad, actually. And I suspect that as I go further and I refine, I might see an improvement. That's my hypothesis. With that in mind, well, if I want a 10% success rate and I want to try and find a way to commercialize my creativity in any way, then I'm going to have to really up my numbers, that's going to be huge. So that information is power, right?
Exactly. Totally agree. I'm loving this discussion. I'd love your observations around this. I often feel that people don't dive into the things they want to dive into because there's a fear of success. Because if they actually are successful, then there's accountability. And people will start looking at them as sort of mentors or a person to follow. And they now have to answer to that. And then they consciously or unconsciously self-saboteur themselves by saying that they can't or they don't want to or all those various things in order to limit themselves. Because part of it, besides some other elements, is that fear of success. They think, will they be successful? Will they now have to be accountable and now be seen as being in the limelight? What are your thoughts around this?
I mean, you're talking about imposter syndrome, really, aren't you? It's kind of like, well, if I put myself out there and someone listens to my music, or I go and perform, then I've actually got to do it. And then what will people think? And will I be judged? And the inner critic is very, very loud and has a lot to say about this. I've named my inner critic Sebastian, which helps me tell him to shut up.
Yes.
So I can say, thanks, Sebastian, for your views, but no, thank you. I've even written a song about him, actually. It's called Sebastian Says, if you want to listen to it. Nothing good ever came from the comfort zone. And if you would like to have a quiet life, sort of sitting within the comfort zone and just replicating the same things every day, that is entirely your prerogative.
Yes.
But I do think that amazing and brilliant and wonderful things can happen outside the comfort zone when we extend ourselves and push ourselves. And I'm not immune to this either, by the way. I mean, all of the things I talk about, I suffer from myself. So I'm really a living example of everything that everyone goes through. I have got a few things that have happened that have been really exciting. And yet I know there's so much further that I need to go. And every time I put myself out there, I'm exposing myself and my views and my thoughts and my opinions and my voice, and running the risk of being criticized or making a mistake or whatever. But the alternative is to sit at home and twiddle in my thumbs and stare at the wall, watch TV. I don't know. I just think that there's so much joy and satisfaction, and also your growth surprises you. When I look back to how I was writing and performing and the things I was doing 10 years ago to what I'm doing now, the things I got scared about then, I don't even touch the sides for me now. And now I've got a whole new set of things to be scared about and worry about. So it doesn't ever go away. But the evolution that comes from your creativity and from sharing your work and yourself is extraordinary. And it's not just to your benefit, it's to the benefit of everyone around you. You've got some sort of responsibility, I think, here to create and share your work and yourself for the greater good of society, particularly in today's age,
I teach spinning classes, and it's interesting, the regulars or people who have been coming for a while consciously or unconsciously create comfort zones in things like a spinning studio. So they'll come in and that's their bike. There's no pre-booking or anything like that. It's first come, first serve. And if someone is in their bike, it's like, how can that person be in my bike? So it's just fascinating how people create comfort zones in the smallest ways in their lives.
Yeah. It's interesting actually, because I do Pilates every week and I've been going to the same teacher with the same group of girls for over a decade. And every now and then we've signed up together for a beginner's class. And this Monday we were doing our class and we did an exercise and she said, oh, you'll be pleased to know that's an advanced exercise. And I say, for goodness sake, this is a beginner's class. Why are you giving us advanced exercise? Because the truth is that the better you get, the harder it is, right?
Yes.
You just keep on adding something else. And that's the same with creativity as well. There's no there's no destination. You don't get there and then it's done. It's just a step on the way to the next thing, the next challenge. But it's those challenges that complete us, that make it exciting, that make life worth living. Otherwise, to create is to be human and to extend ourselves is to be human. So for me, it's a sort of prerequisite for living any kind of satisfying life.
So the podcast is listened to throughout the world. So as a final message, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that if you have ever said to anybody that you're not a creative person, please will you pick up a journal and journal on that or meditate on that and whether there's any truth in it. And that I'm here to support you in finding your creativity, which is a fundamental part of being human. And I firmly believe that no matter what stage of life you are and how many limitations you might have on your time, you can find a creativity that works for you and a balance that works for you, and that you, your family, your community, and the world at large will be better for your art.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Celeb Savant. Please follow Barrett on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Celeb Savant. That's CelebSavant.